Everything I said before was very profound. As I said, I don't understand Bulgarian, but I'm sure I agree with everything that Ivan said about me. I like this setting. It reminds me of an off-Broadway theater, and that's a very nice thing. I'm grateful, it goes without saying, to Ivan and Anna, who are my intellectual companions and my personal friends. And while I have a very minimal understanding of you, I must say I'm attracted to her. I wish I met her. She was willing to take great risks physically. To go on these oceans, I get afraid of the shower. To take on such a risk without being reckless, to engage in social political formats, and to do so responsibly while not taking a neutral stance, it's a quite remarkable person. And while this topic should not enthuse anybody, I think it would engage her. And so I'll tell you what I'm going to talk about. I hadn't planned on this as an introduction, but this is about very unpleasant movements that we have seen at different places and at different times in the world. And we see them now today. It's like, what I want to do is like the FBI. With serial killers, the FBI draw a profile. And what I'm going to do, hopefully effectively, actually it will be effective, is going to draw you a profile of what I call movements of rage. So let me begin, and if any of you have attention deficit disorder, you feel you can leave. I will not talk to you ever again, but you can leave. All right, let me begin. The political imperative facing the non-Western world for the last 2 centuries has been and remains how to respond to history's most novel social cultural mutation, and that's Western Europe. Now, the responses have ranged from indiscriminate adulation to complete rejection, but most frequently to mimicking the West. In turn, mimicking typically leads some to attack the counterfeit character of Westernization in their countries. And occasionally, this preoccupation with the West produces an intense feeling of what Nietzsche called ressentiment. And it sounds very impressive. French words always do. They don't mean much more than English words, but they have a certain cachet which academics like to use. Ressentiment basically means to someone or some culture's indelible sense of inferiority. And in the case of the relationship to the West, it's an indelible sense of inferiority to the West and hatred of the West's not only powerful, but highly positive attraction. So there's this rejection and attraction simultaneously. Those whose identities fit this, they're not only angry at the mimicking, but they have this incredible sense of their own inferiority because they can't match the West. So they hate the West, but they can't do away with the West as a reference. Those whose identities fit this pattern are potential leaders, members, and followers of what I call movements of rage. So I'll tell you what a movement of rage is. It is a neo-millenarian amalgam, and I stress millenarian. Millenarian movements were supposed to exist in the Middle Ages. What you see today in ISIS and other movements, which I will talk to, is a neo-militarian movement. It's not communist, it's not fascist. It is an entirely different pattern of political life. It consists of a charismatic leader, an apocalyptic ideology, and a strategy of nihilistic violence that's driven by an existential fear of annihilation by the West and inspired by a transcendental vision. So on the one hand, there is this imminent sense that the West is going to destroy us. Jews are going to destroy Germany. Westerners are going to destroy Peruvian identity. And at the same time, they are inspired by a transcendental vision which will, in effect, purify them of Western contamination and create a world free of it, as well as their own perceived inferiority. Now, first thing I want to do is dismiss the label fascist. These movements are not fascist. More than anything else, Mussolini's fascism was a liturgical movement of rage. In Stanley Payne's words, elaborate ceremonies, innumerable flags, and the mass response of someone's falling asleep already. The immense presentation of ceremonies, the mass response of presente to the calling of the slain comrades' names expressed this new fascist cult of transcendence through violence and death. Now, Italian fascism's basic flaw was its inability to resolve its ambivalence between being nationalistic and revolutionary, and it decided in favor of nationalism. And that flaw reflected fascism's unwillingness to identify an imminent existential threat to the Italian nation. The predictable result was fascism's failure to translate rituals into a movement of rage fundamentally alienated from its national host and ready to violently cauterize it. Something about all revolutionary movements and movements of rage, I'll stay with you, that is common is they don't like their national host particularly. The Nazis were not simply German nationalists. They were more than German nationalists, where they wouldn't kill all disabled Germans. They wouldn't kill Jews who had more medals than any other Germans in World War I. There is this ambivalence that movements of rage have towards their national base. The point simply is that fascist Italy resolved this ambivalence in favor of being nationalist. Movements of rage don't allow the Catholic Church to exist. Movements of rage don't allow the National Army to exist. They destroy them. They don't make the trains run on time. They change the nature of the culture. Furthermore, fascism, at this point in history, at least in California, is a name that you use for anybody you dislike, which means basically that it has no meaning whatsoever. So I'm going to give you the features of movements of rage, none of which Bulgaria has experienced or is likely to, but have influenced world history and may in the 21st century. All right, the first feature of a movement of rage is most often the capital city in non-Western countries is identified as a site of Western corruption. It is a city desired because of its material temptations and hated because it personally rejects those who want to be leaders. The city, for people who join movements of rage, is a composite of bonfire of the vanities and satanic evil. In Kampuchea, the Khmer Rouge entered the entire city. Not only the city's ethnic Vietnamese and Chinese inhabitants, but everyone tainted, contaminated by the West, as evidenced by their speech. You speak French, you die. Your education, you have one, you die. Your occupation, and even your dress, you wear a tie, you die. Which is lucky for this audience because only one person has a tie. The fact of the matter is, what movements of rage are concerned about is contamination. Mortal contamination of what is perceived to be their national identity. In the 19th century, which was the first movement of rage in modern times, a man named Hung Xiu Chuang, who said he was the brother of Jesus Christ. He was the leader of the Dai Bing Rebellion. He refused to refer to the capital as Peking and changed its name to Demon's Den, and proclaimed that Peking could only be restored with all the demons, all the foreign demons, Manchus and Western forces would be not defeated, but physically exterminated. I'll give you another example. During the interwar period in Romania, the Iron Guard, whose leader was Codreanu, directed its scorn at Bucharest with its French-speaking and cosmetically adorned officials and officers. They wore rouge, they wore lipstick. They could have lived in Berkeley. It was a very odd reality and offended most Romanians. But Codreanu's insane rage was reserved in particular for what he called those demonic, satanic forces, Jewish forces, who deformed and disfigured our Daco-Roman racial structure and put in its place. And this could be said by particular movements throughout the world in the 19th and 20th century, who deformed our national culture and put in its place the pseudo-westernized politician who seduced and spread his infection throughout society. Let me give you the second feature of movement of rages. And that's their leadership. Typically, it's drawn from two people who are sleeping. Typically, it is drawn from provincial and socially marginal elites. They're not drawn from urban ghettos. Provincial elites live in two worlds. They're more than parochial, and they're less than cosmopolitan. They are uncomfortable in each world and not fully a part of either. Their response is nihilistic violence aimed at both the corrupting, tempting city and the idealized and despised rural poor. Their intent is to violently extirpate and transcend both these flawed realities, the corrupt city and the backward poor, in favor of a utopian community free of psychological tension that they feel free of status deprivation, and free of political desperation. I'm going to give you some examples. I realize these examples are then, not here. They're not all in Europe. They don't speak about Brexit. They don't have a damn thing to do with whether Greece is really a country or a resort. But the fact of the matter is, they are movements which, when they occur, frighten the hell out of people in their own countries and the countries around them. Let me give you some examples of these marginal leaders. Abimael Guzman, who was called Presidente Gonzalo. He was the charismatic leader of Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path, the Peruvian movement of rage. He fits the provincial marginal profile perfectly. He moved from Lima to the provincial university city of Ayacucho. There he took the position of professor of philosophy, and he created the Shining Path. Now, if the university supplied the cadres, the province provided followers from a marginal, depeasantized peasant stratum, no longer able to work in agriculture and not able to work in the cities. They were free-floating, angry people. Ayacucho, and this is true of most movements of rage. Most movements of rage, most revolutionary movements, good or bad, have a site, a particular site where they cluster, where they form an identity, where they're insulated from those who dislike them. It could be Ayacucho, it could be Yenan, or it could be Cluny in the 15th century. All revolutionary movements need sites that are insulated, that allow them to form an identity that is completely at odds with that outside and that is willing to exterminate it. Ayacucho was a festering and fertile site where Guzman created a compelling syncretic ideology. This is another feature of movements of rage. They don't have coherent ideologies. And so when people look at them, they say, these people are crazy. They're not going to amount to anything. But when you think that their audience is a confused audience, a marginal audience, part rural, part intelligentsia, part city, part cosmopolitan, part parochial, then a syncretic ideology which is made up in an eclectic way and which doesn't appear coherent to a professor of political science or sociology, has an enormous appeal to people who themselves are syncretic. Guzman made a syncretic ideology out of, listen to the following: Maoism, the ideas of Mariátegui, the founder of the Peruvian Communist Party, and many references to the Incas. Now, most of you would not be really taken politically by this ideology. But the fact of the matter is thousands, tens of thousands of people in Peru joined this movement and engaged in violence, nihilistic violence, that nearly toppled the government of Peru, and that treated its enemies by just hanging them, by eviscerating them. It sounds like something that the Protestants and Catholics did in the 16th and 17th century in France. I'll give you another example of marginalized leadership by a very famous scholar, Eugen Weber, who wrote the very good book, From Peasants to Frenchmen. Well, he happened to be a German-Romanian, and so he was interested in the Iron Guard. This is what he says about the leadership. Leadership's important, because if you're a policymaker and you want to know where the bad guys are, you better know where to look. They're not in the cities. They're in the provinces. I'm quoting like Codriano, its leader, who was the son of a small-town high school teacher, like Iomota, the son of a country priest, like Constantin Papanace, the son of Macedonian settlers in Dobroja. Legionary leadership came from the provincial, only just urbanized intelligentsia, sons or grandsons of peasants, school teachers, and priests. So, if anybody here is interested in policy and wants to really prevent movements like the Iron Guard or Shining Path or the Nazis, the thing to do is arrest everybody who's teaching in the provinces. The other thing is you promote priests to bishops, and you give doctors a position in the university. And there's no one left. It's all over. You don't go to the ghettos and see who's going to come out and throw a bomb in Paris. The real locus, the site for leadership for these movements comes from the province. However, this emphasis on placing on provincial elites doesn't eliminate the importance of urban ghettos. Ghettos, with their prison extensions, are malignant monasteries. It's an important thing to take into account. Prisons in Brussels, in Paris, in London, prisons with their, ghettos with their prison extensions. What do I mean by that? I mean that a good portion of the people who live in ghettos, who are between the age of 16 and 20, end up in a prison. And that combination of ghetto and prison life acts as a malignant monastery. What do monasteries do? Monasteries take you out of your life. They put you in a site that's insulated from the outside world, and they make you saints. Well, prisons and ghettos don't make you saints. What they do is provide you with fanatical identities that are then formed, and then when you're set free, you are prepared to commit spectacular acts of terror. There's no more important thing to look at if you're worried about terror in a West European city than what's going on in prisons filled with Muslims. I give you the third feature of a movement of rage, and that's the intrinsic value placed on nihilistic violence. This isn't terror, where you go out and assassinate somebody. This isn't violence like you have in World War II. This is violence designed not only to destroy institutions, but to physically annihilate everyone who is seen as a carrier of contamination that is destroying your national culture. Fanon preached it. Pol Pot practiced it. The Khmer Rouge murdered between 1 and 2 million out of 7 million people. They weren't Nazis. They didn't have ovens. They weren't communists. But within a very short time, they took 2 million out of 7 million people and killed them. And the ones doing the killing averaged between 15 and 17 years old. In the case of Sendero Luminoso, which most people call Maoist, which was absolutely absurd. Typically what we do when we see something we're not familiar with, we assimilate it to something we're familiar with. So who's around doing crazy things in 1968? Mao. So what must the Khmer Rouge be? Maoist. They're not Maoist at all. They're a movement of rage. 2 million out of 7 million people killed. And not just because of their ideology, but even their dress. In the case of Sendero Luminoso, another alleged Mao organization, Presidente Gonzalo assigned blood quotas to each cadre. Think of that. Blood quotas. You are revolutionary to the extent you go out and you kill a number of people who are presumably some sort of kulak, or you've been in a Lima school where you had a French teacher, and you kill them. Now, this may not be the most engaging thing in the world for an audience, but the fact of the matter is it engages me, because these movements, while varying in time, varying in place, and most often not successful, so there's a really good reason not to pay attention to them at all. But when they do come to power for a year or 2 years, they engage in behavior that is not only horrific, but speaks to constituencies in those countries that find this nihilistic behavior and this apocalyptic vision compelling and enough to make them lose their lives. But let me talk about the proletarian revolution. Mao is a bona fide communist, bona fide Leninist. I remember when the Cultural Revolution occurred in Berkeley, everybody on the left was applauding Mao. He was killing prostitutes. He was getting rid of all the flies in the country. He was cleansing the country. And all these young men and women, all of them with trust funds, all of them were out there saying that this is the way to do it. This is the way to defeat the system. Listen to Mao Zedong, a good Leninist. At the beginning of the great proletarian cultural revolution, Mao proclaimed Beijing is too civilized. The city is corrupt. This isn't a city that's westernized. This is a city that is communized. And he sponsored the Red Guards, a movement of rage that one sinologist has insightfully remarked resembled William Golding's Lord of the Flies. And that's exactly what it was. In heading the Cultural Revolution and creating the Red Guards, Mao set himself in opposition to Beijing, in opposition to the party leadership. He marginalized himself deliberately in an effort to destroy what he saw as Soviet revisionism, which would lead to what? The restoration of Western capitalism. For all of these movements, Peru, Mao, Khmer, the Iron Guard, it is always the West that is the obsession, that is the source of infiltration, contamination, and deformation of one's pure culture. In Mao's words, you might not believe these are Mao's words. I didn't when I read it. Quote, the sign of a true revolutionary was particularly his intense desire to kill. That doesn't sound like the class war to me. This man, Hitler, was even more ferocious. The more ferocious, the better. The more people you kill, the more revolutionary you are. And in true nihilistic fashion, Mao declared, we're going to carry the great cultural revolution through to the end. If it comes down to it, we'll all go down together. Hitler said the exact same thing years earlier. I want to take two phenomena that seem to be outside this profile of movements of rage. The first is, in light of Stalin's great purges and Mao's cultural revolution, one has to ask whether or not communist regimes, they weren't socialist. I can't stand it when people say it was state socialist. It wasn't state, it was party. It wasn't socialist, it was Leninist. And that's the end of the story. The fact of the matter is, in light of these great purges and the Cultural Revolution, one has to ask whether or not Leninist regimes were movements of rage. So that I don't have to talk about movements of rage, I can just talk about communists, although what I just said about Guzman calling for blood quotas, which is nothing I ever heard Stalin or Mao say specifically, though Stalin did spend many nights just writing the names of people who he was going to kill. My answer to whether or not communist regimes were movements of rage is developmentally yes, essentially no. Let me explain what I mean. Relatively soon after gaining political power, Leninist regime identified what I've called in a number of articles, which very few people have read, as an imperative task: consolidation. What does it mean? You've gained power, but now having gained power, you're worried about maintaining your identity. You've got power, but you've got power in a whole peasant country, and where are you going to recruit from peasants, and they're not Leninists? So in recruiting, you're going to bring in people who are anti-Leninist and will contaminate you with their commitment to their families, to their religion. So what do? You become hysterical. Typically during this period of consolidation, Leninist elites become politically hysterical about what they see as the increasing subversion of the party's identity by hidden enemies within the party itself. And that leads them to three responses: political hysteria, a fortress mentality, keep everybody out, and nihilistic violence. All of these are defining features of movements of rage. But unlike genuine movements of rage, Leninist regimes typically come to regard this period, this developmental period, as an ideological deviation. This was the case in 1956 when Khrushchev strongly denounced Stalin at the 20th Party Congress, and in the Chinese Communist Party, which denounced the Cultural Revolution in the following terms: the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution was responsible for the most severe setback and disaster in party history. It was a tragedy and disaster. Now, for all this, it took the deaths of Stalin and Mao for the Communist Party to reject its murderous hysteria and its belief in the danger within the party itself. What was the danger in the party itself? I'll say it slowly, because it's the danger that Xi Jinping sees happening in China today. And the most important country in the world today is China. It's not the Middle East, not ISIS, it is China. It certainly is not Russia, which is a dangerous nuisance. It took the deaths of Stalin and Mao for the party to reject its murderous hysteria and belief in the danger within the party itself. What was the danger? That a class enemy seductively was transforming the party's revolutionary selflessness into personal, familial selfishness. And that's exactly what happened with Brezhnev. The party cadres had no loyalty to the party. They got together and they said rituals, you know, glory to the 1917 revolution and all the rest. It's like a lot of Catholics, I'm being one. You go to church and you repeat it all, you don't know what you're saying, and then you leave. Well, basically, what was happening was the fear that these hidden class enemies were bringing about a transformation within the party that would change it from a party cadre of revolutionaries to a party made up of interests that were primarily personal and familial. Okay, let me give you a second phenomenon that really it's surprising to me, but I spent time, I'll run back. But I spent time reading about Franco, which is an interesting episode in contemporary history. I can't speak for Bulgaria, but in the United States, history began when you're born. There's absolutely no sense of history whatsoever. None. Zero. Absolutely none. It's not that if you ask who Thomas Jefferson, and nobody has an idea. If you ask who Franklin Delano Roosevelt is, not a clue. If you mention Trotsky, they think it's a steel band. I mean, there's just a complete absence of historical knowledge, which is frightening, but it is true. Let me look at Franco. Franco's strategy during the Spanish Civil War was a clear instance of a movement of rage's preference and rationale for nihilistic violence, for extirpating, annihilating. By the way, that was Hitler's favorite word. If you do a word content of Mein Kampf, and you have better things to do, the major word he will use over and over is annihilation. Franco repeatedly rejected the advice of his more powerful and indispensable allies, Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, to move swiftly against Madrid and win the war, end the war. Franco's rationale was that a slow, prolonged war was imperative in order to completely and physically annihilate his enemies on the left and right. For Franco, victory meant not only military defeat of the Republic, but more importantly, the complete extermination of socialists, communists, Jews, liberals, and Freemasons. I don't know what it is about Freemasons, but it was a particular obsession with Franco. Namely, all those groups that he saw really posing a mortal threat to what he saw, and I'll get to this notion, to what he saw as a genuine reality. And the genuine reality was a true Spain, a pure, undefiled, neo-recontista, Catholic and fascist Spain, uncontaminated by all of those things I mentioned above. All right, the fourth and fifth features of neo-millenarian. I'm very, very impressed that without air conditioning, you're all listening. Thank you. All right, the fourth and fifth features of this type of movement are a transcendental vision. It's absolutely essential. You can't have a movement of rage without a transcendental vision. And that vision is incarnated in a charismatic leader. So you have these two things conjoined. What I want to emphasize now is the transcendental vision. In a very Hegelian, what's that noise? Anti-Leninist manner, Mao captured this incarnation perfectly. This is Mao. The question is not whether or not there should be a cult of the individual, but rather whether or not the individual concerned embodies the truth. If he does embody the truth, then he should be worshipped. Lenin was going like this, as Mao mentioned these words. The critical point is what kind of truth is being talked about. And this I want to get across more than anything else. Revolutionary movements in general, and movements of rage in particular, believe in a utopian reality they consider to be genuinely real, not simply an ideal. That is to say, if we talk about democracy, we say it's imperfect, but we can improve it because the ideal is democracy. For movements of rage, that ideal is the genuine reality, and the empirically real is nothing but a source of contamination. Let me quote Wolfgang Leonard, who was a communist, German communist. He was living in Ufa in the Comintern during Stalin's time. I'm quoting him. Reality in the Soviet Union was completely different from the picture presented in Pravda, aptly named The Truth. But somehow, I dissociated these things. It was almost as if there were two separate levels of reality. One of everyday events and experiences, which I found myself often criticizing. The other, that of the great party line, I still regarded as correct. Namely, genuinely real. In contrast to the everyday life that he saw, the imperfections of the Soviet system, the failures of the Soviet system, the injustice of the Soviet system, the fact of the matter is, these were simply indications of the city of man. These were imperfections, whereas the correct line was not simply a goal, it was not simply a symbol, it was the Word become flesh. That is to say, when he was, as a party member, working for the party, toward the goal, that was reality. That wasn't simply trying to get closer to communism. It was communism. He was working in the party, for the party, and that was the Word become flesh. And outside appeared real, but it was nothing but Plato's cave. It was a set of imperfections. Movements of rage are extremely difficult for us to grasp, and I've only got 2 more points. They're long. Movements of rage are extremely difficult for us to grasp because their conceptions of reality are pre- and anti-modern. They don't fit the Enlightenment West. They don't fit the secular mentality. What we consider to be a symbolic ideal, members of these revolutionary movements consider to be the genuinely real, while the empirically real is an imminent, pressing source of infiltration, deformation, and contamination, which has to be not just institutionally destroyed, but physically annihilated. Physically, those people who occupy it. All right, and now for the Taliban and ISIS, which isn't the end, but it's almost the end. There is a great deal of very, very useful commentary about ISIS. In fact, one exceptionally good article, if you can find it, I forgot to bring the reference, is in the New York Review of Books. Its author is called Anonymous, and the title is The Mystery of ISIS. One purpose of this talk has been to demystify ISIS, to identify it as an Islamic movement of rage, not fascist. And let me spell that out. Al-Baghdadi, its current leader, has made clear that Baghdad is Babylon. He has little chance of getting Baghdad these days, but that is the goal. Not Raqqa, not Mosul, not Rome, Baghdad. The site of heretical Shiite power. Shiites who are to be exterminated. One and all, exterminated. Even worse, Baghdad has been infested in his eyes by Western mimicry with its accompanying cultural and psychological corruption, concretely, and I don't mean this as a pun, concretely expressed in America's green zone, the living embodiment of the Western presence in contamination. Baghdad's capture was essential, and this may be a thing of the past now because we know he's not going to capture it, but nevertheless the rationale is important. He wanted to capture it because it would provide evidence of the power and reality of a new restored caliphate free of Western contamination. It's always get free of Western contamination. I don't care what the movement I've talked about is. He wanted to demonstrate an empire powerful enough to do something extraordinary, destroy the false names and boundaries of the Western colonizers. You know what the first line in Genesis in the Bible is? The world was without form and void. Well, the world is not void, but it is increasingly without form. We have Brexit. What happened to the EU? We've got Catalonia. We've got Northern Belgium. We've got Scotland. We've got Northern Ireland. These aren't, to the best of my knowledge, third world countries. And yet I'm not predicting they're all going to break away, but there's a lot of people in each of them who would. We're living in a world of changing names and boundaries. That's one of the legacies of the end of communism. And we're not used to it yet. It's not just that we're getting sinister parties that are xenophobic, and an immigrant tsunami, and an EU that doesn't have any signature whatsoever. It is a very unclear world. What these people in ISIS were doing was saying the boundaries and names that you gave us with Sykes-Picot are not our genuine names and genuine boundaries, and we're going to destroy them. If that would occur, it would have demonstrated to the world that al-Baghdadi was charismatic. What do charismatics do? Weber said to be charismatic, you have to perform miracles. Well, a miracle would be to destroy the 100-year legacy of Western colonization in the Middle East. Fact of the matter is, ISIS possesses all the features of a movement of rage. Its founder, al-Zarqawi, absolutely fabulous, interesting man. Not fabulous, interesting. Highly interesting man. I would not invite him to dinner. He was called the Caliph of Death. Here's his profile. He grew up in a provincial area outside of Amman in Jordan. He then went to jail time. He went to prison. He came out of prison and he went from being an outright thug to an Islamic jihadist leader of a movement of rage, praising heroic martyrdom, and committed to nihilistic violence in favor of an apocalyptic vision. He is an ideal type. He was a bum, a thug, a smart bum, and a smart thug. He did well in school, and so he went to prison, and he didn't just serve jail time. He met Abdurrahman and Iman. And by the time he came out of jail, he was a committed jihadist warrior who formed a movement, ISIS, which we have to deal with today. You know how he died? He died when the United States was smart enough not to think of him as a thug, but to find his spiritual advisor, Rahman. And when we found the spiritual advisor, we followed him to Mr. Zarqawi. We sent in an F-16 and killed both of them. Point isn't that we killed him. It's that the way we killed him was not to think he was just a thug hanging around with thugs, but that he took Islam seriously. That he had an advisor who gave him the sense of living for a genuine reality. I want to speak to that because this isn't directly related to movement of rage. On the other hand, it may be the most important thing about movement of rage. Who the hell joins these movements? I mean, stop and think of it. The chances of living a happy life are not high if you join a movement of rage. And you can forget all this virgin stuff. You know, if you die, you get 40 virgins. So the first thing is, I can't understand why anybody would want a virgin. But aside from this odd notion that you'd like 40 of them, I really don't think that no matter how adolescent and how much your hormones are raging, that the way you think you're going to get a virgin is by blowing yourself up. So let's say that these people who join this type of movement have a different reason that you have to take seriously. ISIS appeals to potential recruits, and that appeal is to relieve them of their underprivileged, subordinate existence. They're nothing. These are people who are ambitious, who think well of themselves, and they're nothing. They're never going to become Prime Minister of England. They're never going to become President of Syria or Pakistan. They're nothing. They're underprivileged, negatively privileged, ordinary, and they have nowhere to go. What does ISIS offer them? It offers to elevate them to an heroic status and paradise in the present, not only in the future. That is the key. We stop and we look at these recruits and they say, oh, well, you know, they can't wait to get a bomb and blow themselves up, and then boom, they become a martyr and they have all the virgins. The fact of the matter is, listen to what I said about a genuine reality and a reality. When they join jihad, being in jihad is the true reality in this world. It's in this world. I don't know many Roman Catholics are here except for me, but let me take the Roman Catholic Church. I'll give you a good example which doesn't seem like a movement of rage. When I go to church on Sunday, I receive the Eucharist. You know what the Eucharist is? The body and blood of Christ. It's not a symbol. It's not like Lutheranism. It's not like Episcopalianism, a little piece of bread and wine, and you go, oh yeah, it was a nice Last Supper. This is Christ in your body. It's not waiting for me to go to heaven. It's now. I am now part of Jesus Christ. Now, after that, I go back outside and I just become Professor Jowitt, which is fairly mundane. But jihad is different. Jihad, being a revolutionary, means every day and moment of your life you have Jesus Christ inside of you. The genuine reality is not martyrdom. It's not virgins. It's being a hero in your everyday life and experiencing paradise in what you're doing. Now that, if you believe, is a darn good reason to die. Because your ordinary life is dirt. It's mundane. It's me getting a job, buying a new car, traveling to God knows where you want to travel. Or in California, how long you can live. If you go to California, everybody there wants to live to 114. I've never seen a place, but that's heaven. They're out running every day, having heart attacks. They all weigh 110 pounds. It's a religion, but it's a religion of mundane, material, selfishness. The appeal of all movements of rage is to present you with the genuine reality, denial not only of the empirical, but the empirically contaminating ideology. All right, final point, but one. Movements of rage have occurred almost entirely in undeveloped countries, except for the most successful one, the Nazis, who came to power in a technologically, economically, and scientifically advanced, highly educated country in Western Germany, in Western Europe, Germany. Now, as I said at the beginning, the leaders of movements of rage are often from provincial backgrounds, like Hitler, hate the city, like Hitler. In Hitler's eyes, Weimar Germany was a Western colony, a mimic replica and dependency of the West, with Berlin a site of concentrated Western decadence. In the new Nazi Germany, the capital, Germania, would be a monumental, sterile city made up of the new reality, populated by the SS. It was a precursor of Pyongyang. For the Nazis, the quintessential representative of the West in contamination was the Jew. The Jew was the imminent existential threat to the German race. I'm not going to go into why. If anybody wants to know why I think the Jew was so obsessive with the Nazis, I'll be happy to tell you. The point simply is, in general, for Hitler, who believed in the aristocratic quality of nature, that's what he called it in Mein Kampf. Nature is naturally aristocratic. The Jews were the antithesis of that. The Jews, he said, were people who lived for the day, for the empirically real, for material success, for individual accomplishment, for hedonism, when in fact, what revitalizes and immortalizes the human being is heroism. And I cannot stress this enough. The West, since the Enlightenment and since the Second World War, you very rarely hear the word hero. In the United States, it's a travesty. If someone jumps off a little building and saves a child, he's a hero. He's not a hero. He's courageous, and he's ethical, and he's decent. Heroes mean something special. Heroes transcend the ordinary. That's what we think of heroes. You don't even hear the word hero in our lexicon anymore. We don't think of it. We think of the stock market. Will Greece pay back its debt? That's really heroic. Will Brexit ruin the EU economy? Another heroic concern. I mean, there isn't a leader in all of Europe that can spell hero. So if you look for Hitler, the Jews were such a danger because they personified the anti-hero. He said, whether in their, and I'm quoting him, whether in their diseased Soviet materialism or Western financial guises, the Jews were a mortal danger to what revitalizes and immortalizes man, namely heroism. Now, I said there was a final point, charisma. Charisma is a word that's overused. It's not understood. I've been studying it for 30 years, so I know exactly what it means. I won't go into this, but I'll tell you who a charismatic is, someone you'll die for. That's who a charismatic is. It's not Ronald Reagan, you get, you know, John F. Kennedy, a charismatic who is some you're willing to give your life for. Now, you can change that definition, and I don't want to go into charisma today. All I'm saying is Weber gave a definition of charisma that's important. To prove you're charismatic to your followers, you have to perform miracles. Moses crossed the Red Sea. Okay? That's pretty amazing. You know, you just get a sea and you say, part. That really stuns your followers. All right? Jesus, can you imagine Jesus? I mean, he goes to a wedding, it's a normal wedding, and everybody's drinking, and they run out of wine. And he takes a cask. His mother comes up, typically, nice Jewish mother, comes up and says, would you be good enough to do one of your things, you know, change it into wine? And so Jesus goes up and he taps the cask and you get Cabernet Sauvignon. Now you would say that is the sign of a miracle. But one of the things about charismatic that demonstrates is that it not only impresses some people to follow you, but it scares the hell out of a lot of people. Because if he can touch water and make it wine, he can touch you and make you disappear. Charismatics are not pleasant people. They're awesome. They're a combination of attraction and of fear. Well, basically, there's no question that Hitler was a charismatic. He conquered everything from Norway to Greece, and you know how many men he lost? 58,000. That's pretty miraculous. I mean, a nation of 60 million people, you lose 58,000, and you've conquered all of Europe, and the ones you haven't conquered like you. At least on the mainland, the Swedes give you all the iron you want, the Spanish give you a division to invade, the Portuguese play off both the British and the others. Turkey was willing to go into the Axis if they had defeated the Soviet Union. Switzerland kept their money. I mean, basically, this was a miraculous man, and he demonstrated it. But I want to talk about what else you need to be charismatic. And this is generally forgotten. A charismatic has to take his vision and separate it into two parts. Exoteric and esoteric. What's the difference? The exoteric means that you make an appeal to your mass audience. Let's take Hitler. Obvious leader of a movement of rage. Hitler took an audience of just natural Germans, and he appealed to the modern and traditional. He appealed to business, I.G. Farben. He appealed to science, Werner von Braun, a Nazi who later became an American hero. It's wonderful what history can do. And then there's an esoteric, and this is what is key in defining of any revolutionary movement, but especially a movement of rage. The esoteric appeals to the elite who see not the modern and traditional components. We're going to make Germany great. We're going to do away with the Versailles Treaty. We're going to put people to work again. We're going to have a strong army. The esoteric appeals to the elite who believes in the genuine reality. And that esoteric, genuine reality was embodied in one of the most remarkable organizations in all of history, and that's the SS. The SS was to be the womb, the laboratory, the catalyst, and the substantiation of the Nazi utopia. Ruled by a eugenically superior Aryan aristocracy that would transcend not only national boundaries, but according to Hitler, nations themselves. It's not enough for a charismatic to have miracles. If you don't, you end up in Berkeley having hallucinogenic things in the middle of the campus. But if you perform miracles, you get followers. But you get two types, and that's critical. You get those who see ordinary reality as the reality, and you get an elite who sees the ordinary reality now in despicable terms and buys into the notion that there's a genuine reality that is not in the future, it's now in the present. It's when you put on that SS uniform, go through your training with your nice favorite German Shepherd, and at the end of your training you take a knife and you kill the dog. because you show your total commitment is now to this organization, which in itself is not the representation but the embodiment of a new superior reality. Final point. That takes me to the 21st century and to the real desire for a glass of wine. We're used to, for the last God knows how many years, thinking of Islam as the enemy, which it is, by the way. Barack Obama may not want to say so, but the fact of the matter is most radical terrorists aren't Irish. They tend to be Muslims. It's a little bit like the mafia. 99% of Italians are not in the mafia, but 99% of the mafia are Italians. And so 99% of Muslims may be just nice, ordinary people, but 99% of the people that are killing us are Muslims. So that's it. I would suggest to you that we imagine the unimaginable. In the 1920s, not many people gave the Nazis a chance of coming to power. And not many people thought that when they came to power, they would do what Hitler said they would do. They were a long shot. He was considered bizarre, odd. The generals didn't like him. The aristocrats didn't like him. The socialists didn't like him. The communists didn't like him. The Catholics didn't like him. I mean, who's going to put a bet? Imagine you're at a horse race and you have Hitler. You know, it's like 120 to 1. But 5 years later, he was running Germany. Well, I want to mention to you the possibility of a neo-millenarian movement of rage other than Islamic. Imagine the military, political elite of China, a nuclear power with a nationalistic population, economically developed, technologically sophisticated. Imagine it violently fragmenting this political military elite. Imagine it violently fragmenting in response to what is going on today and about which most people don't know a damn thing. And that is Xi Jinping is carrying out a purge that is more extraordinary than any since 1978. He is purging the elite in the party, the elite in the army. He has taken over the army. He has purged over 10,000 people who occupy elite positions, and he is beginning in the last 3 months to start saying nice things about Mao Zedong. Now, all of that may add up to nothing. One of the worst words in the English language is potential. I can remember in high school people saying, you know, old Billy over there, he has the potential. He has the potential. He's going to be something. He's still got potential. And he's nothing. Most potentials don't eventuate into reality, but some do. And Xi Jinping is taking on what is a Brezhnevian elite. It's corrupt, hedonistic, materialistic, concerned with its family, doesn't give a damn about any party mission or any party vision. And he is trying to restore it, and there's bound to be a coup against him. The question is, will the coup be self-contained, or will it become violent because it will include the army? And if that violence, should it occur, spills over to society, you've got a situation that no one outside of a few sinologists is aware of. Because in Chinese society, there is a vibrant, dormant, repressed, but nevertheless active neo-millenarian movement called Falun Gong. It appeared in 1999 when 10,000 people showed up in Tiananmen Square. Do you know what the reaction of the Chinese Communist Party was? Complete political hysteria. Every sinologist I know has written, we cannot understand this. This is the most unprecedented response to what appeared to be nothing but a spiritual exercise sect. And yet that spiritual exercise sect had members among the top party officials, among the top army officials, among the top economic officials from every region in China and from every sector of society. Now, am I saying that this is all going to happen? I'm saying no one thought the Nazis were going to happen. I don't believe in Nostradamus, and I'm not trying to play him, because he never said anything right, or for that matter, intelligible. But with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I gather there'll be questions, and I will try to do my best. I also understand that not everyone wants to stay, so for those who have to leave or just can't wait to leave, please leave, and I understand.
Thank you very much. We have 25 minutes for conversations. You stopped where many people expected you to begin. So from this point of view, please.
You didn't say anything about... You hardly said anything about the US apart mentioning California and Berkeley several times. Can you tell us something about the US? What's your view of the non-rage supporters of Donald Trump?
I'd be happy to. I'm not an expert on American politics. I can tell you more about Burundi than I can tell you about American politics. But of necessity, being an American citizen, I have had to follow what's going on. There's no basis for a movement of rage around Trump. There's a movement of anger, of fear and anxiety. The fact of the matter is, like in many countries, but certainly in the United States, the major source of anger and anxiety, anger at the failure of Barack Obama and George Bush to provide jobs. This is a very specific concern. There is a growing divide, which you know as well as I do, between those who are rich and those who are poor. I mean, it's biblical. It's right out of Matthew. To those who have, it will be given, and to those who have less, it will be taken away. A very odd statement for a Christian. But in any case, that's what's happening. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So there's no middle class. I'll give you a startling fact, and then I'll get to the answer of rage and anger in California, particularly in California because it's a one-party state. It's entirely Democratic. You have to really look for a Republican in California. 3% of the deaths in what used to be a very moderate state, New Hampshire, as well as Maryland, as well as Michigan, as well as Eastern Kentucky, 3% of deaths occur among white middle-class males from heroin. There is an epidemic of drug abuse and death that's not limited to those states, and it's because those white middle-class males know they will never get a job again in their life. Never. And it's not only the white middle class. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the type of anger that is behind not just Trump, but behind Bernie Sanders. The funny thing is Bernie Sanders took the rage or the anger of the young who see no future for themselves. I mean, basically we have a society now where if you grow up with educated parents who went to college, have the money to pay $60,000 a year for 1 year of college, $60,000 1 year of college, and you're smart enough not to go into English literature, but to study computers, and you're good at computers, and you're smart enough to marry a girl who had the same education and knows computers, you are going to be a happy American. And then there's the rest. And the rest don't only include the middle class, because there's no jobs. There are no jobs. My father worked in a factory for 47 years. My mother worked in a factory. My grandmother and grandfathers worked in a factory. There are no more factories. They hired 700 to 3,000 people. Now they have jobs, or rather enterprises, that hire 11 people and do all the work. So what we are looking at is a reality beyond Trump. We're looking at a reality where the nature of productivity and post-industrial gives money to those with extraordinary talents, and there's no room for anybody else except McDonald's and Starbucks. And the really bad thing is, they're not just Starbucks and McDonald's, but if you look at clerks, or you look at secretaries, they're disappearing, they're gone, we don't need them. When I first became a professor, there were 10 secretaries. I'd bring down my paper, I'd give it to Aisha, she'd have no need. I can do it myself. I can send it to somebody in Uzbekistan. The fact of the matter is, Trump is in part the result of high-tech globalization and the absence of industrial jobs, and there's no cure right now. The one thing that Trump or Hillary, if she stays well, if she doesn't stay well, there's something that will create more panic than we've ever seen, I think, in my life, certainly in the United States. But basically, if they come out and say, I'll spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, the first day in office, $1 million, we're going to go into the ghettos, we're going to go into the poor white areas, we're going to go into the middle class, we need foremen, we need engineers, we need people who do construction. It would diffuse about half of the anxiety and fear in the United States today. I mean, Obama was an outsider. Trump is an outsider. Sanders is an outsider. Why? Because the people that exist are stuck. They're constipated. They're like the Council of Europe. They're constipated. I'm hoping that Brexit will be a laxative that will sort of, you know, get things moving in Europe. But as I say, you have nothing but poor leaders. And we have nothing. Obama was a poor leader. I don't care if you like him or dislike him. He was ineffectual. Didn't do anything. He's a black president. What did he do for the black population? Nada. Most of the ghetto cities in America are led by black mayors. What do? Steal and go to prison. It's just a fact. It's not racist. So when I look at the people for Trump, they could have been my father. My father would have been for Trump. Why? Not because he wants to destroy the United States. And that's where the movement of rage doesn't work. Because no matter how visceral, emotional, and heated the disagreement between Trump and Hillary, all of them accept the two-party system. All of them accept that when one loses, he just goes home and flies his plane around the world. None contradict the constitutional order. Movements of rage use the constitutional order to destroy it. No one in the United States is willing to do that. So we don't have a movement of rage. What we have a movement of is anxiety because we don't know what the future is, desperation, and that doesn't lead to rage, it leads to alcohol, suicide, and heroin.
So you mentioned briefly that there might be a good type of movement of rage. Do they have all the characteristics of the ones that you described? Are all the ones that you described bad types of rage? And can you give instances of good type of movements of rage?
I can't think of any type of movement of rage that could be good. You could have movements of rebellion or revolution. The United States in the 18th century fought the British Empire. Washington did the same thing as Stalin. And when people retreated, Stalin put squads in back and killed anybody who retreated. So did George Washington. George Washington was not a communist. Basically, George Washington, after 8 years when people said, and this is a movement of revolution, when they said to him after 8 years, we want you to be king. He went to Newport, New York, and he said, I'm ashamed of all of you. We fought for liberal principles, for the rule of law and individual liberty. We are for the belief in the liberty for everyone and equality. So I can see movements of rebellion and revolution, including the French Revolution, at least in 1789. It got worse after that and ended up in a nice tyrannical Napoleon. But the fact of the matter, 1789 was a very positive, and it was filled with rage. Unfortunately, the rage then dominated. But I can't think, in the terms I'm mentioning, you can think of a positive movement of rage, because it's nihilistic.
Thank you, it was very interesting. I would like to ask you what our answer as a democratic society, or at least in Bulgaria we hope that we are a democratic society, what our answer should be to the movements of rage, and also aren't we creating saints from martyrs that are dying for their cause by killing them and by answering exactly with what we are trying to avoid, actually?
I don't think we are elevating them by killing them. Their death is only respected by those who agree with them, which is a minority of their own population and minority in the world. I don't think killing a Nazi made the Nazis feel better or made the West think higher of the Nazis. I think killing members of movements of rage is a wonderful thing. It decreases the numbers of people who are going to try to destroy my civilization and will not accept the basic premises that we can try them, we can give them a jury trial. No, they don't want it. They'll go to prison and they will create new cadres. I don't think so. You know, the question you raised about Bulgaria, I have no answer, but I want to respond to it. And I don't mean to offend anybody. Small countries have no influence. All right, that's just a fact. But that's 9 out of 10 times. It's not always. My point right now is, unlike since 1991, when small countries didn't count at all. Didn't count at all. You had your freedom from the Soviet Union. You were happy to join the EU. NATO came to protect you. And basically what you said was, spasiba. And then you find out that not everything is wonderful. The EU didn't come and invest $20 trillion, you know. In Bulgaria, they went to Hungary, they went to the Czech Republic, you know, went to Poland. But now there's a difference in the leaders you choose. And the reason is the leadership of Western Europe is pathetic. Hollande, he couldn't be elected the head of my Rotary Club. Okay? Merkel was an outstanding leader. She was an outstanding leader. She was a good German. But now she's ineffectual. It's not just the vote in Mecklenburg, it's also the whole thing with immigration. She didn't pass the test. And now you've got this alternative for Deutschland. It's not going to win the national election, but it's going to further diminish her responsibility. Spain, Italy, Greece, Portugal don't count. Britain just took itself out. So what do we have here? We have an absence. I hate the word vacuum. We have an absence of effective leadership anywhere in Europe. Now, I'm not suggesting if Bulgaria comes up with Pericles that you are going to run Europe. But I would suggest to you that you are in a very important, not the most strategic, but an important position. You're near Turkey. You're part of an Eastern Europe that is going the wrong way. Kaczynski in Poland, in Hungary, Orban. You are in a position where you can be rational. And if you can, and I have no idea about Bulgarian politics, like most politics in the world, it's probably corrupt in part, or in large part, and there's very little that can be done about it. But you better do something about it. Because if you want to protect yourself and have a sense of dignity, not just as individuals and families, there's absolutely no reason why a small nation is an insignificant nation. That is a critical distinction. A small nation is not an insignificant nation. Holland was about that big, and it was one of the two greatest powers in the world in the 17th century. So don't tell me small doesn't mean important. But what you have to be able to do is decide as a people, not just as a group of people here, but as a people who get together as citizens and decide, I'm sick of being insignificant. Because that's what you are. Bulgaria is insignificant. People think there's Hungary, Croatia, Albania, Bulgaria. You know, maybe I'll go to vacation there. I don't know. I have to find it. I don't mean to be mean, but this is a fact. Make yourself visible. Now, how you do it, I don't know. If I were a magician, I'd tell you. But if you just sit back and say, oh, we've got corruption, we've got the same damn president, nothing can be done, let's go to Austria, which is a bigger mess. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I need the mic. I guess the only point we didn't, well, so far cover is the dangerous nuisance, Russia.
Oh. Yeah.
Would you kindly?
Oh, I'd be delighted. Yes. Putin, Russia is a fundamentally weak country filled with resentment. And that's all you have to know about it. It is a fundamentally weak country filled, burning with resentment. It wants to be a great power. Look what its great power has given it. A beach, Abkhazia. South Ossetia, which isn't even North Ossetia. Then they took the Crimea, which Khrushchev gave away when he was drunk one night and is all Russian, and they want it. And then they took eastern Ukraine because Ukraine is falling apart. It's weak. And then they supported Assad, this powerful man who controls 1/3 of an insignificant country. And people in the West are worried he's going to invade all of Europe. I'm serious. If you read the American press, they think Putin is Hitler. That he's going to invade Estonia because it has Russians. If that's the case, why doesn't he invade Kazakhstan? They have more Russians. I'm not making light, but I do want to minimize Putin. Putin hates the West. He hates the West. Hedonism, materialism, individualism. And so Beck and I get on Aeroflot from Paris and we fly to Moscow. And you know who's on Aeroflot? All of the children of the Siloviki with $16,000 purses. But he hates the West. He hates the West. It's just that the kids should go to Oxford. Not to Moscow. The kids should go to Berlin and learn German. The kids could go to, and they go. Where are they? You're on the Black Sea. They're buying Cyprus. They own Montenegro. Why aren't they good Russian nationalists backing up the Russian imperial state? The only places he can invade are the size of this room. The fact of the matter is his armed forces are weak. He can't use his nuclear weapons. And I know I'm drawing a caricature, but it isn't much of a caricature. I remember when their brand new submarine, the best submarine they ever built, nuclear powered, the Kursk, they put it in the water and it sank to the bottom. That's Russian technology. So I don't understand the fear. What I do fear is that when Putin sees an area that is close to Russia, not far away, that is showing signs of disorganization or disintegration, and when he finds a timid, paralyzed, stupid West that will not stand up for anything, he'll move in. Why shouldn't he? It's a free gift. It's a free gift. So my answer is he hates the West with a passion. He sends his children to Western schools. All of his Siloviki friends are in the West today buying the best cars that you could possibly have. And that the only danger he presents is if there is an area close to him that is weak and the West decides we don't want them. One more question, and then I'm really thirsty.
So then, let's move away for a while from the local problems and come back to the general picture. So, in case I allow myself to exaggerate a little bit your picture, then it is very pessimistic, almost fatalistic. If movements of rage are byproducts of modernization, and if new digital technology destroys working places, producing more and more resentment and provincial elites, then nihilistic killing is in front of us. Where is the hope, please?
It's a wonderful question. I like intelligent questions with humor. If you take the last part, where you're going to get increasing provincial elites because you're getting the rich and then the provinces. The people in the provinces are willing to back xenophobic movements like Le Pen, but the majority of the populations of Western countries to date, and I don't see any reason for them to change, are still committed to the constitutional order, to the political organization of their countries, and to the economic organization. So what you are getting are emotions, not programs. And until a movement of rage has a program, it doesn't amount to anything. But let me take your first point. I did not in any way, I'm not fatalistic. When I pointed to China, what I wanted to do was to raise a flag and say, don't be surprised if movement of rage don't simply stay in the Middle East. There are areas where indeed, as you correctly point out, modernization is affecting China, but it's affecting 700 million people poor differently than 300 million people who are rich. And so of all the countries in the world, if you ask me where is a potential movement of rage, China and South Africa. South Africa will not matter because it has no impact on anybody except the United States because of a large educated black middle class. But for the rest of the world, they'll say, forget it. Forget it. It's going to impact Zimbabwe. Who cares? But if China happens, then everywhere from Taiwan to Bulgaria is going to be affected. Thank you very much.
Very short question, because what I found absolutely interesting was the fact that normally the way we're dealing intellectually with this type of movements, I'm speaking English, probably too much Bulgarian accent, so you're not getting it. But my idea was how we're dealing with this type of movements. Because there's so much kind of troubling, we're trying to pretend that they're not fanatical, and basically there is always interest behind them. For example, when we talk about the Islamic State, we prefer to talk about the oil and the financial interest and so on, because this is the way we're normalizing them. And my idea is very simple one. Is this type of a normalization positive or negative? Should we think about them at what they are, if they are what you're telling them? Yeah, or politically it's more effective to deal with them pretending that there's something different.
No, I think we should. Does everyone hear the question? No, I don't want to deal with them as normal, as being interested in oil and everything else, because that does not provide enough incentive for the West to attack them. Because we're always going to have enough oil. Let me give you an example of the United States. We no longer need Saudi oil. We are completely self-sufficient in oil. So if we get some movement in the Middle East with a bunch of Shiites killing Sunnis, the popular opinion in the United States would be good. Let them kill each other. Good. Now that sounds nasty, but that would be 80% of the population. But if you say, what we have here is a movement that is gaining in power, not only in the Middle East, but in Paris, in Berlin, in London, and that these people are forming a movement that are committed to the destruction of all of these countries. And whether or not they have the power now, they are going to continue to create chaos every month of the year. Then you will get a reaction. What did it take to get the French to do something? Did the French say Total, our oil company, is missing out on Iraqi oil? No, no, no. You didn't see the gendarmerie come out. You didn't see the blue buses with the men with machine guns. But when you got Nice and when you got Paris, then all of a sudden the French said, we should contribute more to the fight in the Middle East. These are movements that have to be destroyed. And I'll tell you the sad thing. ISIS could have been destroyed in 1 month. The United States had sent 1 Marine division into Iraq. And don't tell me Iraq sovereignty. Nobody respects it, and there is no Iraq. There is no Iraq. So if the Iranians can run around, why can't we run around? Send in 1 division of American troops. There's 25,000 ISIS members riding Toyotas with machine guns. Are you telling me that 1 division of American, with everything we have in military power, couldn't destroy them? Libya's been going on for 1.5 years because ISIS takes over Sirte, a town this big, okay? And people don't know what to do. Oh, they're sending terrorists across the Mediterranean. They're going to send immigrants. But nobody wants to be a neo-colonialist. I don't mind being a neo-colonialist. I would have sent a French, an Italian, an American, anybody who wanted to go, 1 division. There's 3,000 ISIS people in Sirte. They'd be dead in a month. ISIS has been able to thrive because of the timidity, because of the paralysis, and because of the willingness of the opponents of ISIS to have their internal struggles outweigh the importance of ridding us of ISIS. Turkey has 19 different positions, but all of a sudden, the Kurds are going to form a Kurdistan. How long did it take for the Turks to respond? 17 minutes. And they had 20 tanks going in. I don't want to have fear spread in a hysterical way. But I do want fear to be attached to these types of movements, because you never know what set of unexpected circumstances will enable them to grow. That's it.